Hi, so today in this tutorial I'm going to show you how I've made this hand-tied bouquet embroidery. I'm going to do this using the 4 simple stitches, which if you've been here the last 4 weeks you will have seen my videos on this. There's French knots, lazy daisies, satin stitch and stem stitch, and in this I'm going to put them all together and just use those 4 stitches and these embroidery colours to create this. I've created a free pattern for this, which you can grab in the link in the description below. And don't forget, if you're enjoying these, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up and a subscribe. And also drop me a comment in the comments below. Let me know how you're getting on with these videos and what you think of the tutorials, and tag me anywhere that you show these online. Okay, so here's what we need. So I've got my pattern and I've transferred this onto my canvas and mounted it on a hoop. I used my good old carbon paper method, which you will find a link to the video in the playlist for this. And in this we're going to use the 4 stitches that we've done over the last 4 weeks: French knots, the stem stitch, lazy daisies and the satin stitch. So I've got 8 colours that I'm going to use to embroider, to do the different embroidery stitches on here. I've got a dark green, a light green, this sort of baby bluey colour, a pastel-y sort of orange, this pinky lilac, a darker lilac, this pink and some white. And I might actually use a little bit of yellow, which I haven't got to hand at the moment, just to do some bits in the middle of the flowers. Okay, so to start with, I've got my darker green. I'm using my usual 3 strands of cotton, and I'm going to start on this middle stem, and I'm going to start off with the stem stitch. So we start from underneath, bring our needle up and then do a double stitch, pull that down, and then you want to come up about halfway through the middle of that stitch, pull it along and then do a double stitch again. So you just do half a stitch higher than that previous stitch, pull that through, and then back up from the same hole at the top of your first stitch and just pull that. If you find it easier, you can use your spare hand to just hold the looped side over and then pull that close, just so that you get this nice little twisted effect going up the stem. Try and keep your stitches all about the same sort of size, and then I'm just going to work my way up the top to the top of the flower, and then I'm going to use this same green for the lavender stem and this sort of daisy effect stem. So I'm going to do all of these stem stitches in this dark green first. Okay, so now I'm on my final stitch. I'm coming back up again at the top of our last stitch, and then I'm just going to pull it through, and then I'm just going to go back up to the top of our last stitch and finish that off. Then I'll just knot that off. Next up, I'm just going to work on to the stems of my lavender and the daisies using this same stem stitch in the dark green. If you need to finish off your thread through the middle of the stem stitch, you just come up at your halfway point, take it up to the halfway stitch above that one, and then just bring that down and fasten it off, and then re-thread your needle with a knot at the end, and then we just come up at the top of this stitch here. and you literally just continue as you would have done before. So now I'd go up to half above that one, hold my cotton over to the side, and then up through that stitch and just continue to the top. Okay, so now I've finished the stem stitch for all of my dark green stems, and I have my light green on my needle this time, and I'm going to fill in these stems in between. Now, okay, so it is pretty close at the bottom here, and you're going to need to figure it out for yourself what you do. I've got the slight gap, but if you need to lay your other stems on top of your dark green, that's fine. Now I'm just going to continue with my light green stems all the way up the top. I'm not doing these little branches out the side in the light green. I'm going to do those in a different colour. So I'm just going to do this stem. I'm going to do this stem, and then the other two on the other side in this light green too. So now that all of our stems have had the stem stitch on them and we've got the dark and light green alternating, I've now got some of the blue on my needle. I'm going to continue with the stem stitch, and I'm going to do each of these little offsprings with the stem stitch too, but in blue this time. And then again, once we get to the end, I'm just gonna come up. It's only a little short amount of stem stitches that we're going to do for these. When I get to the end, I'm just going to come up and do my little half stitch, and then I'm going to pop a little French knot at the end. 1, 2, wrap it round twice, put my needle back down, make sure that I've got my threads at the bottom of the needle, and I'm holding this with my spare hand nice and tight. Pull that through and just let it go and pull it through gently to pop a little French knot on the end. So now I'm just going to move over to this other side, and then I'm just going to continue with this all the way up this stem and then over the other side too. Okay, so I've finished all of my stem stitches with my French knots in this nice blue colour up either of these stems in our bouquet, and I've got some pink cotton on my needle now, and I'm going to start this main flower, and for this I'm going to use satin stitch. So I'm going to do this the way that I showed in my satin stitch video the other week, where I do a long satin stitch and then sort of a shorter one next to it, and then overlap so that you don't actually end up seeing that there's some shorter stitches. The long stitches hide these as we go along. So I'm going to start in the middle of my petal and go up, and then I'm just going to come next to it about 3/4 of the way down and go up to the top. Another one in there, slight gap in between, so just pop another one in there, and then go next to that one and just bring it down. And then another shorter one. And then right at the end here, I'm just going to put in a stitch that sort of comes down 3/4 of the way, and then one long one which comes right to the end. And then I'm just going to go over to this side and finish that off the same way. And then again, one long one at the end, just bringing it down to the centre to finish it off. And there you go. As you see, the satin stitch all sits nice and flat on our embroidery there, and you can't see the different stitches that you've got, some long and some shorter than the other. So I'm just going to continue with my satin stitch and fill each of these other petals now too. So I've satin stitched 2 of my petals now, but it's quite hard to see where the join is between the 2 of those. So I've satin stitched 2 of my petals now, but it's quite hard to see between these where the join is, where this line is. So actually what I've done is I've got a slightly lighter pink, and I can just about make out where it is at the moment, or where it should be. So I'm just going to put one long satin stitch in and just pull that so that it doesn't overly stand out, but you can see where each of the petals end. And then I'm going to overlay that. So I'm going to continue with my other petals now in the darker pink, and then between each of these petals I'm going to use this slightly lighter pink just to define each petal. Okay, so now I've finished satin stitching all of my petals, and I've put the lighter pink satin stitch in between each one of those. I've got my white on my needle, and I'm going to satin stitch the middle of the flower. I'm going to start from the center, and then I'm going to work my way out, just doing a longer stitch for my first one and then a slightly smaller one, and just work my way round with that sort of pattern so that it's not too bulky in the middle. And there we go. Now I've finished the satin stitch in the center of that flower, so I'm just going to knot that off and get my light green back on my needle, and then I'm going to start the satin stitch down each of these. Now I've got my light green on my needle, I'm going to start satin stitching each of these leaves. Again, I'm going to start from the middle and go down to the bottom. So I'm just going to come out to the side and do shorter stitches to fill these gaps. Oops, get rid of that. And then another longer one. And then just beside that. And then another long final stitch right down to the bottom. And then that's that side. Now I'm going to come over to the other side, start at the top again. Do my final stitch, and then that's that leaf complete. And I'm going to finish this stitch down each of these other little leaves on these stems and finish those off. So now I've finished the satin stitch on all of my leaves. I'm really happy with the way they've turned out. Next up, it's on to the French knots and the lavender. So for this, I've just got my light lilac-y colour, and I'm going to fill each of these with French knots. I'm also going to be adding some of my darker purple a bit randomly throughout to give a two-tone of the purpley colours for this lavender. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and then I'm just going to do my French knots. So come up from underneath, wrap round 1, 2, and then make sure that my threads are twisted at the bottom of my needle and that I'm holding this thread with my spare hand nice and tight to keep those all nice and neat. And then I'm just going to pull this through and then release as we get close, nice and slow. And then we've got our first French knot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave a little bit of a gap between them where I can put the odd dark purple one in. Now I'm just going to continue filling this one, and then what I'll probably do is wait until this thread runs out, and then I'll go back in and add some dark ones, and I'm just going to work my way to the top like that, and then I'm going to move on to filling this one. So I've finished all of the French knots now in my lavender and mixed up the two colours. I'm really pleased with the effect of these. So next up, it's onto these daisy sort of style flowers on the end, and for this we're going to use the lazy daisy stitch. I've got my orange cotton on my needle, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the middle, come up, loop it round as we did, holding our thread out to create a loop, back in to the canvas, come round and then up at the point of the daisy, bring my needle to catch that loop, and then just pop a little stitch over the top. And then I'm going to work my way round, but I'm going to miss every other petal because I'm going to create a layered effect. So creating my loop, going to the point, putting in a stitch to catch that, and missing another one. And now I've worked my way round for the first row of all the daisies. I'm now going to go round and do the lazy daisy stitch on all the ones we missed last time. And there we go, that's all of our lazy daisies done on this flower. So now I've got some yellow cotton on my needle, and I'm going to come into the centre of the daisy and pop in some little French knots. So I think the 4 French knots in the middle there is quite nice to finish that off. Now I'm going to do exactly the same over on this one. So now I've finished my lazy daisies with the French knots in the middle. We're on to the butterfly, which is our last bit of stitching that we're going to be doing on this. For this, I am just going to do a little satin stitch. At this sort of tail end of the butterfly's body, there are just tiny little stitches that are going in here, and I'm just working in a motion where I start at the top and work down to the bottom rather than full length body stitches. So now I'm just coming up to the head of our butterfly. I'm going to put in a couple of longer stitches for the antlers. And of course, I'm just going to pop a couple of little French knots on the top of these. Now, I feel like we need a little bit more yellow on this embroidery. So I've got my yellow cotton back on now. The body's all done. And I also feel like we need to put some more lazy daisies, because I think we've done plenty of satin stitch, plenty of our stem stitch, plenty of French knots. And I think we could do with a little bit more of the lazy daisies. So I'm just going to go up to the top, bring it back down, and then go to the top of the wings and put in a lazy daisy stitch. And go over the top. And I'm just going to work my way round the wings, popping in lazy daisies, just letting them overlap each other slightly. I like the effect that these lazy daisies give to the wings. I feel like they give them a nice light and delicate feel. So now all the wings are finished with the lazy daisy stitch. I'm really happy with this effect. I just want to give it a little bit more colour. So I've just added some more of the blue on, because I don't think there's that much of this on there. And all I'm going to do is just pop in a few little French knots on the wings. And there we go, that's our butterfly finished as well. I'm really happy with the way this has turned out, and we've just used 4 simple embroidery stitches to create this. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish it off with a little bow. Okay, so for my bow on here, we're placing the bow round about where these 2 dots are. I think I might do it slightly lower than those from looking at it now as a finished piece. Now, so I've got my yellow floss, a full strand here, all 6 threads intact, and I've got this little yellow ribbon. Now, if I had this size ribbon, I would just be creating the bow in the same way that I did with these. So instead of using the floss for the way I created this bow, I would just do it with the satin ribbon. But I haven't got ribbon. I've got a knot on the end of my floss. I'm going to come up from this side, thread my bow on, and then go back down the other side. And just center it up where I want it. I'm going to secure this off now. I've still got some left, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go just underneath and back up around this main stem, and then I'm actually just going to pop a little knot in there and trim those off to just give it some add some floss into the bow for some extra tail. And I mean, if you wanted more, you could always add another round of floss. That's up to you, it's personal choice. But I'm really happy with the way this has turned out. So that is it. All that's left to do now is decide what you're going to do. If you're going to pop it into a picture frame, if you're going to finish it off So I've just mounted my embroidery on the hoop, and you can check out my video on how to do this. All I've done differently in this to my other video is I've added some rickrack around the edge, which I just glued on with my glue gun. And I'm really happy with this, and I will be happy with this on display anywhere in my home. Don't forget, if you're enjoying these videos, please hit that thumbs up, give this a like and subscribe, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.